Let's record. All right, welcome to this first episode of my new show, Dismantling Deception, which is complementary to my main show, Pioneering Perspectives. And in this show, I want to empower people by dismantling many of the lies and manipulation in modern day New Age spirituality, but also in modern day business and business practices. And Michael has been a great help in dismantling a lot of that with the book that he co-authored. This one, The Last Safe Investments, that he co-authored with Brian Franklin. And Michael has also written books such as The Education of Millionaires, The Power of Eye Contact. He's created eye-gazing parties. Michael first came into my radar with actually that book, The Power of Eye Contact, and an article he wrote about that, and also related thing, something about consent that he wrote a few years ago on how, I think it was like, almost like a critique of cuddle parties in a sense too, where even asking a woman for consent can create so much pressure. And so that was like rather fascinating. And then Michael really came into my radar with his talk at Awesome Fest on how to connect with influencers. And it really confirmed for me how I was approaching it anyways, and it really like systematized it. And I think that's one of your gifts, Michael. You create things that are already in the air, and you kind of systematize it and create it into a system, which is what this book is doing too, which is what we're going to talk about. The difference between what you secretly call the Flux Plan, which is how the mainstream tells you to invest and tells you can have a good life if you do that, but it's all like a sham, right? Everything's falling apart with that. And now the book talks about a new way of investing called the SAFE Plan. And it's an acronym SAFE, which is where the title of the book actually comes from as well. So, and that book really like blew my mind more than like many other books. To me, like I put it in the same level as the book The Future of Love by Daphne Kingma, which is my favorite book on relationships. And that one, when I read it 12 years ago, it blew my mind, and it's changed the entire way I relate with women and with myself. And what that book did for relationships, this book does for business, career, investing, how I relate to money, things like that. So yeah, so welcome, Michael. So thank you so much for being on this show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah. And one more thing, like, The Future of Love was the only book that I bought a dozen copies of and gave away to my friends. And that was 12 years ago. I'd never done that before or since. But with this book, I've already bought it for at least 2 people. I intend to continue doing that for at least 10 more people.
Well, thank you. That's probably the fastest way to make an author happy is to tell them you're buying that book and giving it to people. So thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, let's dive quickly deep in. Like, what is the Flux Plan and what is the SAFE Plan?
Sure. So the FACT plan is financial advice commonly delivered.
Okay.
And if you've read any personal investing books, you've probably heard this plan because they all say the same thing. Mm-hmm. And the basic idea is don't spend any money now. If you go and buy a $4 latte, you're wasting $3 that you could have put into your savings. And if you go to a movie instead of renting a DVD, you're wasting $10 that you could have put into savings. And then you put all this savings into an IRA or a mutual fund, and then supposedly it grows at 7% or 8% a year above inflation predictably. That's been the long-term average over 70 years or so. So they just project that forward. And then if you do the math and you save enough and it grows at that rate long enough, you'll have $500,000 or $1 million by the time you retire. And that's when you can start spending money and enjoying your life. after 40 years of scrimping and saving and working your butt off, then that's when you're going to be happy at the end of your life with this supposed nest egg that you're going to have. And we call it fact or fucked because there's a lot of problems with every link in that step that I just described. The first problem is that almost nobody saves money. So this is a total fantasy that large numbers of people are going to be saving 20-30% of their income and putting it in. It's just hard. It's hard to save money. There's a lot of things that one might want to spend it on, and going through life in this sort of scrimping saving mode, always having homemade coffee instead of ever buying one out, or never eating in a restaurant, that kind of thing. Like, very few people actually do that. So you can talk about how great it is, but that's sort of like religions talking about how you should never masturbate. They can talk about it, but nobody actually follows that. So that's problem one, is that nobody develops the savings. Problem two is that even if you did develop the savings, this idea that it's going to grow risk-free for 7% a year predictably is really problematic. That played out if you were ending your saving career around 2000, that actually would have played out pretty nicely. But that's a specific time period where there was just an incredible run up in home prices. Since 2000, that's almost 20 years ago, we've had two major stock market crashes and a major housing bubble crash. And now they've come back to a certain degree, but that 20 years has massively messed up that whole idea that you can just predictably, with little risk, get, just put your money in some mutual fund and you're going to get 8% a year. I think if you started in 2000, it's now looking at I could do the math. It's gotten a little bit better in the last year, but it's maybe like 3% per year above inflation. And you're not going to retire on 3% a year above inflation. Like, that whole thing is a fantasy. And then the next step that's problematic is this idea that after 4 decades, let's say you start working in your early 20s, and you retire at 65, which nobody does anymore anyways. But let's say that with that model, the idea that after 4 decades of completely denying yourself, of not developing any of your own, talents, skills, connection, network, you've just been nose to the grindstone working. And now, boom, now suppose you have $500,000 from this magic portfolio. Now you're going to go, golf. This is a very impoverished view of human development and human happiness. So it's messed up the whole way through.
Yeah. And it is a form of misleading deception too, because you're told that if you follow this plan, you'll be set for life and it will sustain you in your retirement. But what happens is that a lot of people retire and then in their old age they start working for Walmart, right?
Yeah. It's a deception that gets people to buy into certain things. It gets them to buy in to basically the whole education, employment, retirement complex. It's a complex that from start to finish. So the average education is around 18 years if you go through college, kindergarten, elementary, high school, all those years. And the idea is you do all that and you come out with a college degree, and now you're set for employment, and that employment is going to give you all this wonderful surplus that you invest. So the whole thing is a narrative, and the narrative maybe worked if you were starting it in the 50s or 60s, or maybe 70s. But for millennials who are starting their career, in the early 2000s, this has been a total disaster. I mean, the millennial generation is completely fucked financially right now. They're drowning in debt. They can't, education expenses have gone up, medical expenses, nobody can get insurance, housing costs are ridiculous. Like these fundamental aspects of a kind of solid middle-class life are just out of reach for large portions of the population that bought into this story.
Exactly. And also student loans are the one thing that you can't even declare bankruptcy for. You have to pay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If they really believed
Mm-hmm.
this model,
Mm-hmm.
they would give the education for free in exchange for a piece of earnings. That would be the only honest education system. And there's actually a company that's doing that right now. I'm blanking on the name right now. It'll come to me. But basically, what they're doing is going to cities in Africa and recruiting the top 1% of educational talent there and saying, we will train you, we'll give you a world-class education in programming and not only will you not pay us for that education, we will pay your living expenses for that education. And now you'll be trained as a programmer and we'll hire you out as, like an upper middle class lifestyle in your city. And you'll have this, these job skills.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'll get the name on that, but it's gotten a lot of press. It's doing well. It's like, it's a model where it says we're standing by the financial value of our education because we know that if we take a student with a certain aptitude and we put them through this system that we've developed, we know that there's jobs at the other end. And I mean, contrast that to our system where it's like, you're going to pay us a bunch of money up front. We're not going to pay you your living expenses. So not only are you not earning money, but which is an opportunity cost, but you have to pay us on loans for totally uncertain job prospects. I mean, you get out of college, you have a degree in, I studied international relations. I mean, I did it because I didn't want to be pegged down and I just wanted to read whatever I wanted to read. But that's a very loosey-goosey major. It's not like you get out of school and you open the want ads and it says, hey, we're hiring international relations majors. You get out and you have this major and it's an uncertain job prospect. And now you have this debt that can't be discharged in bankruptcy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really heartbreaking. Yeah, so tell me about the SAFE plan.
Yeah.
In contrast to that. What is the SAFE plan?
Okay, great. So Brian and I developed an alternative to the FACT plan. We call it the SAFE plan, Self-Amplifying Financial Ecosystem. And what this means is that if you take most people measure the value of the money they have. They measure the value in their life just by money. It's like, okay, I have this amount of I'm earning this amount of money, and I have this amount in the bank and this amount in the stock market, and therefore that's the amount of value I have in my life. But if you just treat money as one aspect, an important aspect, but just one aspect of a larger ecosystem of value in your life, you'll see that there's this system actually of value where it's money is one part, but it's also your social relations and connections. Most people are going to get most of the value in their life through their close relations and their circle of friends and their connections. Almost everything we value in life comes through the people we know, both, obviously the friendships and the relationships, but also job opportunities, employment opportunities, business opportunities, romantic and dating opportunities if you're single. All of these things come through your community. So that's a huge source of value in your life. Another one obviously is your health, your energy, your ability to show up to your work productively with a clear mind and focus. It's again, a huge source of value. You take two people who have roughly the same job skills. One of them needs to drink, 6 cups of coffee just to get through the day and is foggy headed and is eating a bunch of sugar all day to keep going. The other one has a clear, steady, calm mind. The second person is going to do, far better in every measure over their career. But that's not viewed as a form of wealth in the Flux Plan, but in our idea, it's a part of this ecosystem. Other things are your skills, your training, a tremendous amount of the training that you need to develop for your career over time is learned after college. After 18 years of going and slaving away in this academic context, then you need to develop more job skills after that. So that's part of your ecosystem. And our idea is that we call it systemic spending. You have some income now, and instead of socking it away in some 401k that you'll never see the light of the day and may or may not grow over decades and is subject to all these unpredictable crashes, instead of doing that, you spend it now, but you spend it in a particular way. And we call it systemic spending, which means you spend it in ways that amplify this ecosystem. You spend
all areas of your life, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, for example, a gym membership, most economists would not call that an investment. And the personal finance books would say, hey, you should cut your gym membership. You should go to on jogs instead and do push-ups in your room and put that $50 a month into your 401k. Like, I've literally read books that say that. And in our view is like, okay, well, if you're actually going to use the gym membership, which is an if, but if you are, and that $50 is going to motivate you to go, that's an investment. That's an investment in your health and your energy. And that energy will amplify throughout your whole system over decades. Same thing, let's say you're going to go to, spend money on a dinner party. On hosting a dinner party. No personal finance book would ever say that was an investment. They would always say that's an expenditure, a waste of money. And what we're saying is, well, if you invite people that are valuable members of your community, or that you want to get to know more, or that could become good friends or business associates, people that you develop in your life over time, actually that $100 you spend hosting a dinner party is a great investment. So this is a more realistic way, in our view, of thinking about spending, because instead of like save, scrimp and save, it's like, no, you can spend now, but just spend intelligently, spend systemically, in a way that stays in your ecosystem of value and doesn't leak out.
Yeah, exactly. And along those lines, you came up with, investing so that you develop the 4 categories of the super skills. There are the physical super skills, and part of which is clean, healthy appearance and having longevity, which is, what happens when you go to the gym. Then there is your creative super skills, such as contacts and plotting, which you're really great at, storytelling, writing, copywriting, reading. And then there's the personal super skills, which includes teaching and public speaking and selling and networking, and something really powerful called holding paradox. By the way, Brian Franklin has an amazing TED Talk called The Most Powerful Question on Earth. And in the second part of it, he goes into detail on holding paradox. So if you guys want to know more about that. And then, there is your technical super skills, which is systems thinking and financial models and building a marketing crank. And I think one of both you and Brian's gifts is also systems thinking, because that's what the entire book is. And then, so those are the skills. Then there's increasing your happiness exchange rate, not just your savings. And then there's advisor equity, which is, I think, really the most pioneering part of this book. And then there is your tribe. I created a mind map of the entire book.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So,
amazing.
Yeah, it's incredible. And again, there are very few books that I create such a detailed mind map for.
You've definitely been the most detailed reader of the book by far. So I really appreciate that. Should we break down those different concepts that you just shared?
Yeah, let's do that. And I also wanted to share that, in terms of systemic spending, one of the most powerful stories from that book is the two couples who both had the windfall of $4 million or something like that, and they both bought a big house, but one just wanted to impress people, the other thought systemically, and that created a really big difference. Can we start
Sure.
with that?
Yeah. So this
Right.
is a true
Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
Two couples. They both had some kind of business exit that had them several $1 million cash. They decided, hey, we're going to buy a home. That's a common thing when people kind of get that type of cash in their life. One couple thought about it in a very traditional way. So they looked just at, okay, what's the most beautiful home we could get? You know, where are the land value? Where's the best real estate? What's the best kind of investment climate for a home? Where can we get the best labor? All these kind of things. And we call that a compartmentalized way of thinking, which is the opposite of systemic. It's just looking at that one area. And this couple decided that buying a home in, I forget where it was. I think it was Mexico. But, you know, it was a foreign country. They found this beautiful dream home, or it was on an island somewhere. And then they get there and they are bored and they're miserable. They've got this beautiful home overlooking the ocean and they don't know anybody. And they're sitting, you know, by the beach, which is lovely for a week or 2 weeks. But, you know, by the time you're on week 4 or month 4 of sitting at the beach, it's kind of like, okay, what else is going on? They get very bored. They start having some relationship trouble because there's like, you know, there's not much happening there. So it's just kind of putting pressure on their relationship. And they eventually just are unhappy with the situation. And I think they sold the house eventually at a loss because they had built a lot on it. Another couple we know was decided, okay, we're going to look at this systemically. So yes, we want to have a nice house, but we actually want to have that house embedded with community. So we're going to buy a house that has a number of different units on the property. And they actually created, and not only that, not only friends, we want to raise our kids in a community of loved ones. So they bought a beautiful house in Marin. And they ended up, it's shifted from time to time who's lived there, but it's typically been 3 to 4 couples and, you know, 2 or 3 kids at any one time. And the kids love it because instead of growing up in this kind of compartmentalized nuclear family, they have community, they have friends, there's a lot of different caretakers. The parents love it because it reduces the individual burden any one parent has on the child care because it's a community. And this has been a thriving, vibrant community. And the difference is they thought systemically. They thought, okay, this isn't just a purchase of a home. It's also an investment in our social relations and connections. It's an investment in our community. And then it has these other systemic benefits because a lot of the people living there were entrepreneurs. So they had kind of business crossovers and, you know, it was almost like a live-work situation for a lot of them. So it spiraled out into their whole financial ecosystem. It's a totally different way of thinking of spending.
Yeah. And this has been really helpful for me, the systemic spending, even in small ways, because personally, I grew up in a military dictatorship. And so it's a country where the government can come in and take away your property anytime and everything you have. And so I grew up with this fear that money can be gone anytime, right? Or will be gone anytime. And so for me, for a lot of my life, like even making the smallest purchase, there was always a sense of guilt attached with it, like, you know. But with systemic spending, I think about even with the smallest purchase, I'm like, oh, like how is this, you know, like even buying this protein bar, how is this helping me with my health? How is this helping me with my friendships? I think of it that way, and that has really kind of healed my guilt as well. So thank you for that.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. Is that the Flux Plan is based on guilt. It's every time you spend, Every time you go on a vacation, that's guilt. You're not giving it to your 401k. Now, if you're just going, if everything in measure, right? If you're constantly taking trips to Vegas and getting smashed and coming back, with a lot less in your bank account and a hangover, it's hard. That's not systemic spending. But if you've been working really, really, really hard, and you go and spend, money on a long weekend at the, just unplugging in a cabin somewhere, no investment book would view that as investment, but we do, because then you come back on your Tuesday or whatever and you're mentally refreshed. And especially if you're running your own business, then the increase in productivity goes directly into your own equity, into your own business wealth. People often ask, well, okay, what about savings in this plan? And our answer is twofold. One is that in this plan, you're constantly developing your earning power. So you actually are saving in the form of being able to earn more with more joy and ease and less time. That's an investment you can make over decades. The other aspect is that we recommend investing in what we call your happiness exchange rate, which is how much happiness can you get for how little money. Because if you invest in that exchange rate, you can then develop a lot of happiness now spending less money. So for example, if you take time and develop a reading habit, which some people have and some people don't, you can get a tremendous amount of entertainment and education for free, basically, just for the time it takes. So that's a higher happiness exchange rate than if you need to go shopping to be happy, which a lot of people do. So if you're like a shopper and you kind of invest energy to then become a reader instead of a shopper primarily, you're gonna be saving a ton more money, which then can go into your savings.
Yeah, along those lines, one of my favorite stories from the book is that of that investment banker who bought the world's most expensive champagne bottle that weighed like 90 pounds and cost like, I don't know, like $33,000 or something like that.
No, the champagne bottle was $200,000.
$200,000. Oh my God.
Yeah, exactly. So this guy had probably the lowest happiness exchange rate ever. He racked up he was like 25. He was like a currency trader. And he racked up what the media reported as the highest bar tab in history. And he just decided he was going to be a high roller this night. He was buying drinks for everybody in the bar. He bought this like ridiculous bottle of champagne that had only been bought like 2 or 3 times in history by celebrities.
Like Jay-Z.
Yeah, Jay-Z, exactly. And he decided he was going to be a big shot. And the next day, he said, they interviewed him about this, and he was like, "Oh, it was quite nice." And like he just spent $300,000 to have quite nice. You can have quite nice for a picnic. You go, go get a sandwich with a friend and sit under a tree, and you've just had quite nice for $20. So that's what we're talking about with the happiness exchange rate.
Yeah. And in my own work, this is related to what I do too. This is why I help people like differentiate between the 3 kinds of desires. Is it coming from your programming and your cravings, or is it what you actually want to feel? And even deeper than that, is it coming from the deepest part of you? I call it the deep silence. And the more you get clarity on that, the more you will increase your happiness exchange rate. And and the more you do that, the more you can invest in developing your super skills, which increases your earning potential.
Yeah. So how has you've studied this in such detail. What are some shifts that you've made in your life from having putting the book into practice?
I think one of it's helped gain clarity on the work I do in the world as well, because like one of the main things I do for clients is help them discover their superpower, which is almost like the ultimate super skill because it's the one thing that only you have in the world, so you stand out. Because there's so many like Reiki healers or whatever accountants in the world, but if only you have the superpower, then you're in high demand because like you can charge whatever you want, you know. And so in my marketing, when I tell people that from that perspective, so it's helped my marketing for first of all, just that alone. But also the advisor equity part has helped me a lot too. When you talk about how the informal advisor equity and the formal advisor equity, I haven't had much inroads in the formal yet, but in the informal, like when you talk about, you advise somebody and instead of buying a boat, you get to live on a boat for a few weeks or a year, right? I've had similar experiences where I go on this amazing $1 million retreat every year. And I mean, the retreat center is worth $1 million, but I don't have to like pay a penny because I'm part of a community. So it's related to the tribe equity as well, where we just pay $150 cleaning fee as a group to the owner, and then we share food, of course. But even that comes from the $10 a month we've been contributing to the group, and so it's like without buying $1 million retreat center, we get to use it at least twice a year, like 2 weekends a year. So I've personally have that experience with the informal advisor equity, and that's been an amazing shift because in the Flux Plan you have to toil away so much money for 40 years to experience luxury like that. Whereas with the advisor equity idea, it's like, no, you can have it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a couple different terms you mentioned there, and that's a great story. And I want the viewers to get exactly what they are. The super skills versus the market skills. So a market skill is any skill that you can directly sell, and that is a skill that is valued on the marketplace. So that could be computer programming. It could be graphic design, copywriting, being a car mechanic, whatever it is. The super skills are skills that will increase your value in almost any context, any industry, and any market, any up market, down market. So those are things like, and you mentioned them, social connecting, interpersonal skills, learning how to build a community, learning how to be of value to other people, learning how to communicate persuasively about the work you do, your own health, your own energy. All these things are skills that you learn over time that are going to be valuable no matter what job you have, what career, and whatever the market is doing. So those are two concepts you mentioned. And then you were going into the whole concept of advisor equity, which I should also break down.
Yeah.
And the idea of that is that in the Flux Plan, basically you're just slaving away and you're hoping that this nest egg is going to support you, which may or may not materialize, is going to support you in older age. In the SAFE plan, one of the assets that you're building up beside your own earning power is the ability to advise other younger people on their careers, and specifically their businesses. The millennial generation is an entrepreneurial generation. They grew up with the internet. If you're a little bit older, or if you're a millennial now and the next generation, I forget what they call, who knows what all the different generations are being called, but, 1 or 2 generations down, you've spent a career building up your skills. You can advise younger people. So it's an intergenerational transfer of knowledge and wisdom. And in return, you can get some kind of formal or informal equity in that person's business. So formal equity is stock. And typically, if you advise a young startup, if you're on the board of advisors, you'll typically get somewhere between, you know, 0.5% and 1% of equity if you're an active advisor. And if you do that over 5 or 6 companies, you actually now have some equity in startup companies, 1 or 2 of which hopefully hits, and then you have a decent chunk of equity. Informal equity is what you talked about, where you have helped somebody, and now you have kind of a goodwill with that person, and they want to help you back when you need it. And so you're developing this community of people that where there's goodwill flowing in lots of different ways, and you feel that you're going to be taken care of. You know, one of our measures of kind of social wealth is how many couches could you crash on for how long? You know, because I mean, think about it, like really think in your own city. Okay, for some god awful reason, I couldn't pay rent or I lost my place.
I did that for at least 1 year.
Yeah. How many couches for how long? And that's actually a pretty significant measure, because the one thing a lot of people are afraid of is like they're going to lose their mortgage and be homeless. Well, not if you have a community, not if you've been developing up community over decades. So
yeah, that is great. Yeah, in fact, one of my favorite sections in that. Well, you had the story of the guy who spray painted a building, turned down $60,000, and instead just wanted stock equity, and it was a smart move because that building was Facebook, and you know, he got like millions and stuff. And you also talk about how those are the outliers, and most people would be more in the middle, where they might not make millions, but they might make, you know, 5 figures or 6 figures with this advisor equity. And related to that, I think you talked about how the most important point was when you said the missing piece is better than the whole pie. And you gave the example of the 2 runners, where you said that high-level people are easier to help because for the smallest, least amount of effort in a critical area, they get the highest amount of results, so the gratitude is high.
Yes. So if you have a skill that is potentially a bottleneck for someone else who has a lot of value going through their life, then you applying that one skill, there's some ducks applying their skill over there for our listeners. If you apply that skill, you're going to have an outsized impact, and there's going to be, you know, all the more value coming back your way. So for example, one of my market skills is copywriting. Although writing is actually a super skill because it's useful in almost any context. You know, if you're a car mechanic, it's useful in the context of fixing cars. If you are a copywriter, you can use it in almost any business context. So it's a super skill. So I have frequently offered copywriting to people who are, you know, quite high level in business, but they're not copywriters. And if I can help them, that's an area where there's a tremendous bottleneck. If someone has a business but their copy sucks, just spending a day fixing it can often have a, you know, tremendous impact on their business.
Okay. Yeah. Well, Michael, thank you so much for being on this call. And if everybody wants to have more details, feel free to buy the book for sure. Buy it for your friends, and feel free to contact me or Michael. In fact, if you contact me and buy the book, I'll give you this mind map as a bonus as well. So that's my offer. Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great. I appreciate just the level of detail that you've engaged with this book. It is music to an author's ears.
You're welcome. Yeah.